Good morning, all you beautiful people. We are back here in the saddle at the Harris Hacienda once more to deliver the word from the living God. And that's a great honor and great task. I take it very seriously. I, who knows, maybe it's the only thing keeping me alive. It gives me something to do every morning before I go out and deal with the things of the day. Many of those things are involved in ministry, but you see, for somebody like me, the main part of my ministry is the prayer and the ministry of the word. That's my chief duty. That's my responsibility. Now I wind up doing other things because as a pastor, an evangelist, you you do a lot of different things that just need to be done. Maybe somebody else ought to do them, but there's nobody else to do them. But we can't lose sight. We can never lose sight of what our primary goal is. And Peter and the apostles defined this in Acts chapter 6 when they were being overwhelmed by the work of the early church. And at a point where there may have been as many as 10, 15, 20,000 people in that church, an almost entirely Jewish church. And in those days, chapter 6 of the book of Acts, if you have a real Bible, it says the Acts of the Apostles. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. They were fighting over who gets what. One clique wasn't being treated as good as another clique. One bunch thought they were getting the short end of the stick, and who knows, they might have been. But the key word here is murmuring. Remember, that is why God finally had enough of the children of Israel in the wilderness with their murmuring and their complaining and their griping and their backbiting. Moses and Aaron said, "You don't murmur against us, you're murmuring against the Lord." Finally, after the rebellion at Kadesh Barnea, when they refused to go into the land, God said, "These 10 times have you tried me. These 10 times have you murmured against me. Well, none of you over the age of 20 is going to go into the land." And they waited 40 years for all those people to die. Moses did more funerals than anybody in history. He was doing funerals every day for 40 years. So the scripture makes it clear what the apostles' job was. And by extension, it is essentially the job of a pastor of a flock. Let me be clear, the flock needs to do the work of the flock. It is the pastor's duty to protect that flock and to feed that flock, not to wipe its nose and change its diaper. Now, sometimes we have to do that, but that's not what we're here for. Here's the job of your pastor, in case you have any doubt. Now, I also understand that this is not normal, but this is the way it should be, because we've come to an age where we never have grown-up Christians in our churches. Most churches are full of baby Christians. I don't care if they've been Christians for 40 years. They've never left the foot of the cross. They've never got up and taken a step on their own. They're still babies. They still have to have their nose wiped and their nose wiped and their butt cleaned. Get some new seat covers on. It's just the way people are. hard to get around it. You see, you can't fulfill the role of the church as long as the pastor is babysitting the church. He has to be free to protect and feed the flock. The church has to do its own work, and it is a separate work, explained here in chapter 6 of the book of Acts. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected of the daily ministrations. Then the 12 called the multitude of the disciples unto them and said, it is not reason that we should leave the word of God and serve tables. He said, look, y'all do this church work yourself. We have another job. Our job is to protect you and to feed you. Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of honest report, full of the Holy Ghost and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. But we will give ourselves continually. You had trouble with the word continual. That means all the time, without ceasing, unstopping, unflailing, unflagging. We will give ourselves continually to prayer and to the ministry of the word. That is their job. Prayer and the ministry of the word is how they protect the flock through prayer and feed the flock through the word. Their job is not to take out the trash, although I do. Their job is not to clean the toilets, but I do. Their job is not to run the food pantry, but I do. Their job is not to go to the hospital and do the visiting, but I do. Don't you see? The work of the church is to take care of the church, to take care of each other. The work of the pastor is to protect the flock and to feed the flock. But that's a side issue. I believe that the Lord put it upon my heart to tell you that, because if you watch me long enough, you will become a mature Christian. So part of my job is to remind us all how mature Christians should act. I have people I lean on because pastors need pastors. But I don't expect them to change my tire or give me grocery money or pay my light bill. I expect to feed them and to protect my soul and to feed me the Word of God. Iron sharpens iron. Every pastor needs a pastor. Every pastor needs to be fed. So, pastor, if you're just relying on yourself for your own edification, you're living a very, very circumscribed life. And you're not reaching your potential. And you're unable to effectively pastor your own flock. God made it like this, to where we need one another. We're in community. I've got, a half a dozen men that are smarter and holier, probably, and more sanctified, more mature in Christ than I am. And I'm in contact with them all the time. And when it's necessary, we love on each other. And when it's necessary, like I say, we rebuke and correct one another. And that's hard, to tell a man that's smarter than you that he's wrong. But you have to do it. Iron sharpens iron. We are all accountable. In the Church of Christ, there is no such thing as the laity and the clergy. That is an invention of the Roman Church. It stinks to high heaven. It's false. It's not the way God intended. Now, did God raise up certain people to do certain things? Yes, he did. They're called the ascension gifts. He gave gifts unto men when he ascended. Ephesians chapter 4, those gifts are apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers for the work of the ministry, for the building up the flock, for edifying the church of Christ. But that does not exempt them from needing to be fed also. So I tell you what, one way you can show maturity is to look and see what your pastor's doing and see what burden you can take off his shoulders so he doesn't have to do it anymore. Are you shorthanded? Is he having to go turn on the camera in the sound booth before your service can start and then run up there and get on the stage? Well, why don't you learn how to turn on the camera and volunteer and you do it? Just an example. Just an idea. Chapter 2 of the book of Joel. We're into the day of the Lord, the great tribulation. And in those days shall there be great tribulation, such as not was from the beginning of time, and nor there ever shall be. It's going to be a time that's different from every other time. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen. And then we're not that far from it because it happens after the rapture. The rapture's coming soon. Christ is coming soon to take you home. We ought to be happy about that. I'm happy about it. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is at hand. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. That's this army that's going to come upon Jerusalem. The army that's pictured in type in the first chapter, the army of locusts, but this is not the army of locusts. Verse 3, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth, and the land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape them. The greatest army the world has ever known, the armies of the Antichrist, are going to come and destroy the people, just like the locusts did, and left nothing but dust and stubble in the wastelands. Now we're talking about a wasteland of souls and of bodies. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of the flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. I'll read you some more about the descriptions from Revelation that it's talking about this day of the Lord, the time of Jacob's trouble, the 7-year period that begins after the rapture at the beginning of the confirmation of the covenant between the Antichrist and Israel and many others for a peace which lasts only 3.5 years until he sets him up in the temple and proclaims himself to be God and requires to be worshipped as God. And then for 3.5 years, God will supernaturally preserve a remnant of the Jewish people. 1/3 of all the Jews on earth will be saved alive and will enter into the millennial kingdom. In Zechariah chapter 12 and 13. These are all horrible things, but they're all going to happen. The Antichrist is going to make Hitler look like a choir boy. Hitler killed 1/3 of the Jews on earth. During the reign of the Antichrist, he will kill or cause to be killed 2/3 of all the Jews on earth. It is a horrible, terrible thing. People call me a Christian Zionist. I am a Zionist because my king is a Jew, and he's coming back to sit on a Jewish throne in the Jewish capital, which will be the capital of the entire world. And the law shall go forth from Mount Zion. He's going to sit on the throne of his father David. Well, you don't like democracy. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a theocrat. Now, I want God to reign on earth, but I will not accept some man acting like God reigning on earth. Don't you see what I mean? I'm not going to accept either an Ayatollah or a so-called Christian leader to lead me in some kind of theocracy or his version of what a godly life is supposed to be. That's for the birds. That's for the peanut gallery. But one day my king will come and his kingdom will be established and he will reign with a rod of iron. His name is Jesus and he's coming back. And when he comes, there will be peace on earth, and I'll be all for whatever he says and whatever he does. And I'll be with him, by the way. The Bible tells me that. I will reign with him as a king or a priest, and I would be happy just to be his servant and go fetch him coffee or a newspaper or something. I'd be glad to do that. I'll shine his shoes. I'll carry his briefcase. I've got a lot of practice in that during my life when I realized, of course, I was in my 60s by then, but I realized that I was not a great man. It was a shock. But great men need dedicated servants. And so I have worked with and served great men. It's good to know your place. It's just like Dirty Harry told that lieutenant or the captain or whoever it was, old Hal Holbrook. He says, man's got to know his limitations. I think that was Magnum Force. Beginning in verse 6, more about this army that's going to scare the whole world. Nobody ever seen an army like it. Never been an army like it. Before their face, the people shall be much pained. All the faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war. And they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Ain't no way to stop them. Hello, Susie. God bless you. Neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk. No, they're going to make any mistakes. No friendly fire. Neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path. And when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. It's like you can't kill them. There's no way to stop them. They're powered by Satan himself. They shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run up on the wall. They'll break down the walls. They'll have their way. They shall climb up on the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. And completely overwhelmed. The earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Then it says, and the Lord shall utter his voice before his army. For his camp is great. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? So that time is going to come when Jerusalem will cause the whole world trouble. We're getting nearer that day every day. We've just about turned our back on Israel. We've shut off the arms that they need to complete the job that they need to do against Hamas. No two-state solution will work. There only has to be a one-state solution. That's Israel. These pirates just want to steal the land. They're not oppressed. They're Arabs who want to take over Israel. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. They are Egyptians and Syrian and Jordanian rebels. Those are the facts. You won't hear that from the news people. You won't hear that from the media. There's no such thing as the occupied West Bank. The West Bank is Judea and Samaria. But you see where it's going, because see, the world won't accept that, and it won't accept it until Christ comes and puts everybody in their place. You see, God calls this land his land. He said, that's my land. What are you doing messing with my land? He gave it to Jacob. He gave it to Jacob all the way from the Mediterranean to the river Euphrates. All the way from the Dead Sea, or the Red Sea in Egypt, all the way north to the mountains of Turkey. It belongs to Israel. And one day it'll all belong to Israel, because he will sit on the throne of his father David. Not Netanyahu, not anybody that comes after him, but King Jesus. This time is described when all the world is against Jerusalem. But then God says, hang on a minute. Is that all you got, world? Is that all you got, Satan? Is that all you got, Antichrist? You got the biggest army in the world that the world's ever seen? Well, my army's bigger. My army's stronger. And you can't do anything unless I let you do it. And I've decided I'm not going to let you do it anymore. That's going to happen one day. That's what the day of the Lord is all about. The wrath of God upon a Christ-rejecting mankind, a God-hating mankind, and to bring Israel to the Messiah. Chapter 12 of Zechariah. The burden of the Lord, the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretches forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in a siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. This has never happened yet. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people, worldwide. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Though all the people of the earth, all the people of the earth, all the people of the earth. That's how big that army is. That's how mighty that army is. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness. I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, and the Lord of hosts their God. They'll rise up. And in that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. They took Jerusalem in 67. It became their capital in 2018. On the 70th anniversary of their formation as a state. And the Lord shall save the tents of Judah first. and the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David. And the house of David shall be as God, and the angel of the Lord before them. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they pierced, whom they have pierced. That's Jesus. They will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him, for the Son of God. That's him, who? The Son of God. They shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son. They shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. And then it comes down to the restoration, the beginning of the restoration in chapter 13. In that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and uncleanness. There is a fountain filled with blood, flown from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunge beneath that flood, lose all their guilty stains. There is a fountain filled with blood, flowing from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunge beneath that flood, lose all their guilty stains. The primary goal is to bring Israel to Christ, and it happens. And in that day it shall come to pass, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets, the unclean spirits, to pass out of the land, the false prophets. And it shall come to pass that when any shall prophesy, then his father and mother that begat him shall say unto them, Thou shalt not live, thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesied. They will not blaspheme the name of the Lord anymore, ever. Be punishable by death, just like it was in the law of Moses, because the king was set upon the throne. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophet shall be ashamed every one of his visions. See, they're still alive. The ones that prophesied falsely, they're going to pretend they didn't say anything because they're in a new economy now, the economy of God. And it shall come and pass to be ashamed of their vision. When he had prophesied, neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive, but he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman. For a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thy hands? Then he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. They crucified him. They drove nails through his hands and through his feet. This is the return of Christ, and they will worship him as their king. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. That happened at Calvary. And I will turn mine hand upon the little ones, and it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. There will be a remnant, a third will be saved. And I will bring the third part through the fire, not in the fire, through the fire, not left in the fire, not burned up in the fire. I will bring them through the fire. How? Well, I'll show you in a minute. And we'll try them. We'll refine them as silver is refined, and we'll try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear, and I will say, it is my people. And they shall say, the Lord is my God. When? Chapter 14, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, the day of the Lord. And thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into the captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. But then the Lord shall go forth and fight against all those nations, as he fought in the day of the battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem. He's coming back. And ye shall, it says, and it shall come to pass in verse 6, that in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark. It shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. Talking again about the signs in the heaven and the weird day that's going to be. Talks about the remnant that he's going to preserve and protect. How does he do that? Revelation tells us, Revelation chapter 12. This happens at the midpoint of the Great Tribulation, 3.5 years in. There's 3.5 years left. In chapter 12, it says, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, and the woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and unto his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, 3.5 years, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. The woman is Israel, the child is Christ. The great war was fought in heaven between Michael and his angels, and the devil and his angels. The devil took a third of those angels in the rebellion. And then there was war in heaven in verse 7. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. You see, up until now, right now, Satan's in heaven telling God that I'm evil. But Jesus says he's mine. And God says, case closed, case dismissed, next. There'll come a time, the midpoint of the tribulation, he'll be cast out and can't get back into the throne room of God. And the people on the earth, it says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their life unto the death. Because everybody who gets saved during the tribulation will become a martyr. 99.9% of them, they'll be beheaded, they'll be executed for Christ because they refuse to follow the devil. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell at them. But woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. Israel kills 2/3 of all Jews upon the earth. And to the woman Israel were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness and into her place, where she is nourished for a time and a times and a half, a times 3.5 years, from the face of the serpent. God will supernaturally protect her. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away in the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. God will supernaturally protect that remnant, 1/3 of all the Jews on earth. There's 18 million Jews now. We're talking about 6 million Jews saved, preserved. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. This great army, also in Revelation, we talked yesterday about the weather conditions, the things in the sky, the sun falling down, the meteors crashing into the earth, the famines, the pestilences, the earthquakes, the wars and rumors of wars. We talked about all these things of battle, all of these things, all of these weapons of war. One thing I might add, it gets even worse toward the end of that war. We talked about all the battles and the angel coming down and releasing the demons out of the bottomless pit. And one woe was past, and there were 2 more woes, 2 more trumpet judgments. Verse 13 of chapter 9, and the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels that are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay 1/3 of the part of man. 1/3 of the people that are left on earth are going to be killed. There was already 1/4 of the people on earth killed before, at the beginning of the trumpet judgments. Now 1/3 of all that's left is going to be killed. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them, 200,000. That's 200 million. An army of 200 million men. China could do that now. And certainly China and India could do that now. And thus I saw the horses in the visions, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire and a jacinth and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And by these were the 1/3 part of the men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which ushered out of their mouths. Fire and brimstone. Could that be nuclear war? I would think so. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails. Bombers, submarines. For their tails were like unto serpents, and they had heads, and with them they do hurt. Missiles, rockets, guided missiles, ballistic missiles. The pain is in their head, the fire is in their head, and the bomb on the tip of the missile. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues yet not repented of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. The greatest army against God, against God's people, and against anything good Satan raises up. It is led and powered by fallen angels and demons and Satan himself. But it says, while all this is going on, in verse 12 and verse 11 of Joel chapter 2, God is going to stand up and say, you know, that's enough. This far and no farther. You think you got a bad army? I'll show you a bad army. You think you're tough? I'll show you tough. In verse 11 it says, and the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. For he is strong and executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and terrible, great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Only the Lord and his army, and the one that the Lord's come to save. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army, yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Not yet, but I'm going to be, you see. When he returns with 10,000s and thousands upon thousands of his saints, I'll be behind him on a horse dressed in fine white linen, because white linen is the garments of righteousness. White linen is the garment of the saints. Making up the rest of the armies of heaven will be the saints and all the holy angels. 2/3 of all the angels that God created, the angels who did not rebel against him in Satan's rebellion, when his name was Lucifer, the son of the morning, when he was the song leader in heaven, when he was the most beautiful of all creation, before he became Satan, the oppressor, the opposer, the one who stands against the adversary. In the Hebrew, we derive the word Satan from the word Hasatan, the Satan, Hasatan, the Satan, the adversary, the opponent, who declares himself God and lifts himself above everything that is called God. Him. That is with whom we fight. That is with whom is our war, not with each other, and not which group in church gets their way. That's who our enemy is. Our enemy is Hasatan, the Satan, the adversary. But one day God will destroy that enemy, and righteousness will reign on the earth. We'll be back tomorrow. There's a lot to it, and we're going to get through it. I didn't mean to rhyme it, but we just did. God bless you.